Thank you, Alba. Okay, welcome to the last PhD seminar of the year. We are doing the experiment of bullet seminar. We are going to do this one now, probably another one at the end of the year, at least for the more junior PhD students, so they have a chance to explain what they are doing. We thought that it was too early for people that have been here for very few months to present something. Also, the senior PhD students are people that are a bit more trained by live, this kind of thing. So we should have more security in presenting things. So also I'm going to ask you a special request that when they finish the presentation and you please stand here and absorb it, we will thank them very enthusiastically, because these are the people, these are our future directors of institute, Nobel Prizes, instrument scientists, whatever you can imagine, and these are the people that are going to bring the message of our institute abroad. We want to help them and empoderate them. I don't know what English, empower them to bring science and enthusiasm for science beyond the institute when they leave in not a very long time, hopefully. So we can practice this. So when they finish, I don't want just some clapping. I want to hear, right? Really, and please, people that receive it, raise it. So this is for you, right? So something like bravo. Okay, that's also thank you for the supervisors to encourage your students to give this presentation. I think it's a useful thing for everyone to also create a bit of more it's the life issue, which one of the main goals actually of the business seminar. And without taking more time, I'll ask the first speaker to come here on the left, which is that doesn't work. Yes. Yeah. What do you need? Oh, sure. Yes. Okay. So next 2 seconds. I'll give you a warning. I'll press the bell. But anyway, 2 minutes. But be relaxed. So we have time. So yeah, here is the lineup. So it's in inverse alphabetical order using the name. So you should know more or less when it's your turn and just wait there. And at the end, just absorb the applause, and then we'll ask the next speaker to come. So without further introduction or waste of time, Xavier Canaldo with you. Thank you, Xavier. Thank you.
Good. So measuring soil moisture using passive reflectometry. Cerny Rivo is my supervisor. So first of all, explaining what is reflectometry. We use reflections of different constellations of satellites to get different parameters or geophysical parameters. These geophysical parameters could be, for example, soil moisture, which is our focus right now. And different constellations could be GPS, which is the most commonly used, or it could be communication with satellites or something that is sending signals to the surface. So current ESA NASA missions use GPS signals or radiometers, which are at L-band, and this gives a penetration depth of up to 5 centimeters, maybe 10 centimeters. It depends on the content of water in the surface. And our objective is to get data from more depth, like up to 50 centimeters, also depending on the content of water. And we expect to do so with the use of lower frequency, which we call the P band. That's why we say dual band P plus L to measure soil moisture at root zone level. So this is the simplified electromagnetic physical way to simplify what's going on under the soil. And those are different dielectric slabs that we treat our soil has different dielectrics. That was the bell? Okay. And these are how the electromagnetic behavior is going on. We could spend a week only talking about this, so I stop here. Next slide, please. So this is our current development of the instrument because we are developing a new instrument. First of all, we did some campaigns. This is me, this is Danny. This is our front end, which is what the thing is, the electronic thing that acquires the data, or not acquire actually, but facilitates the data to acquire the data into the computer. And this is the geometrical thing that we saw on the slide before. And we use the Fresnel laws and the Snell laws to determine the illuminated area by the signal that has been pinged on the surface. And this was so big, so heavy, so weight, or however is it called. And now we developed that, which goes here in a drone. And if you could see inside, you could see all the electronics here. And this could also be more smaller, but this is the first prototype. Okay, so final slide. And this is some of the data that we simulated, experimentally demonstrate on the lab using different communication satellite systems, which one of the challenges is that those signals are from military constellations, so we don't know anything about, and it's quite difficult. And one of the main problems now is that this is in the Fourier spectrum thing, and this is the autocorrelation of that spectrum. Wider spectrum, narrow peaks, all good, but the reality is different. We have very narrow peaks. This is 5 kilohertz. This was 20 megahertz. So this narrow bandwidth translates in very wide autocorrelation. So everything is a mess. And we are, I won't say any rude word, but you know. And that's all. I'm more focused on the signal processing part. So we try to minimize the problem with a kind of least squares, Kalman filter, whatever you want to call it. And that's the thing now.
Okay, thank you very much.
Hi everyone, my name is Vivek Golani, fourth year PhD student, hopefully finishing next year. And yeah, I work in the LISA group. In our group, we developed low frequency, high ability and accuracy sensors for gravitational wave missions, especially LISA. And as these missions, scientific missions, become more and more demanding, the technology needs to step up. So we try different solutions to develop our sensors. So that comes up. My project is to develop a temperature sensor that could potentially reach the nanokelvin per square root hertz in the low frequency band using optical cavities. The optical cavity which I use is the whispering gallery mode resonator, which compared to the computational duration cavity, it's really small. They can range from millimeters to micrometers. And yeah, as a cavity, it has a resonant frequency, which depends on environmental and different sorts of pressure, temperature, humidity, etc. So the resonant frequency and the eigenmodes will shift and will split depending on these environmental conditions. So used in a proper way, we can use these frequency shifts as temperature measurement. So this is the resonator we have in our lab, but the one we had, now this one is broken, now we have another one. But we use infrared light, and when you couple it, we use evanescent wave coupling. When you couple the light, you can see it's a very bad picture, but it's the best we have. How the light is ringing inside the resonator. So in order to make this a viable instrument for temperature sensing, we first have to clarify we are not building a flight model. This cannot fly. We are first focusing on learning how this technology works. We are not the first people using it, but we are the first people trying to make it work in the low frequency between from 1 to 0.1 millihertz. So the way to do that is you need to isolate your optical cavity from all other environmental influences parameters. For what we built a vacuum chamber with thermal shields so that we can keep temperature and pressure and humidity, everything under control. And this way, hopefully achieve our goal, which is to measure nanokelvins. And for those who know a little bit of optics, the scheme we are using is a cross-polarization dual lock, where we lock on two modes of the cavity. And the difference between the frequency shift between these modes is what will translate to the temperature measure. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much.
Hello, I'm Victor Rodriguez. I am my second year of the PhD. My work is about aging outflows in dwarf galaxy. I'm going to present this work in aging outflows in dwarf galaxy using manga. When the supermassive black hole of an aging galaxy accretes materia, it releases energy in front of mechanical radio jets and in front of radiative. It is what we call outflows. And they are typically found in massive galaxies, but recent studies show evidence for the presence of outflows and agent feedback in that galaxy, and they are an essential ingredient to understand evolution of galaxy. We use integral field unit spectroscopy. This means that for each pixel of the galaxy, we have a spectrum, and Juan Dominguez Sanchez were able to measure the line radius and classify each difference factor in this diagram, which are called BPT diagrams, in order to see the source of ionization of this spaxel, if they were ionized by star formation, AGN, liners, or composite. They end up with a sample of AGN dwarf galaxies. Next slide, please. And we identify outflows by looking at the oxygen-3 emission line if it is better fitted with a double component. Here we have a narrow and a broad component. If there is a broad component, it means that there are extra kinematic in the galaxy in this spaxel, and therefore an indicative of the presence of outflow. So as we have integral field unit spectroscopy, we are able to spatially resolve the outflow and have this kind of maps, which are velocity maps. An important point is to discuss what drives the outflow, because the outflows can be driven by stellar processes such as supernova or massive star, or by AGN. And we find 7 galaxies with 7 dwarf galaxies with AGN outflows consistent with based on the AGN fraction, the high AGN fraction, the high outflow velocity, and the volumetric luminosity of the galaxy. I don't know if there is another slide. Probably no. Okay. We have also compared with massive galaxy, and it seems that outflows in dwarf galaxy, again outflows in dwarf galaxy, seems to be like a scaled down version of that of in massive galaxy, and that will be all. Thank you.
Thank you.
I'm Simran. I basically work on studying radio emissions from different objects, especially exoplanets and near stars. And today I will be speaking about the 2 projects I have been working on in the last 2 years. Next slide, please. Okay, so the first project I've been working on is about a young stellar object, PHP0701, which is basically a K7 star having a white disk with a gap in it. And there have also been signs of presence of a potential substellar companion residing in the disk. So what we did was we analyzed new VLE data about this target at band KU, that is between 12 to 18 gigahertz, and we found signs of highly variable emission in both Stokes I and Stokes V, with Stokes V only detectable in 2 of the 80 folks. When I say Stokes I, it's the total flux intensity, and Stokes V is that component which is circularly polarized. And from this, we inferred that here we are basically seeing presence of two different components of emission, both free emission, which is thermal one, and the other one, which is a non-thermal component. In these observations, we didn't have any detection, like a significant detection at the presence of the structural companion, but maybe future observations can tell us more. Next slide, please. No? Yeah. Okay. And this is the second project I've been working on. It's about a scallop shell star. So very briefly, scallop shell stars are also known as complex periodic variables, are usually M dwarfs, which show like very quasi-periodic dips in the optical light curves, along with other features that we cannot explain with typical stellar spot models or even with the transiting planet scenario. So what we did was we observed one of the scallop shell, J0508-21, which has a period of 6.7 hours, the photometric rotational period. And we observed this target with UGMRT at band 4 at sub-gigahertz frequencies, twice covering 88% of the period in June and July last year. And we found like a very nice variation in both the flux in Stokes I and Stokes B. So if you can see here, in the first panel, I'm showing the optical light curves where you can see the dip happening at this particular phase. And then in the second panel, it's the Stokes I and Stokes B emission. And just for a brief period of 40 to 50 minutes, we are seeing a helicity reversal in Stokes B, which means the emission, which was earlier left-handed polarized, was shifting to being right-handed and then again being left-handed just for a period of 40 to 50 minutes. And this repeated in both the observations at a similar phase. So possibly, also when there's a helicity reversal, there's also an increase in Stokes I, which means we are having two components given rise to the emission. One component could be a moderately polarized component, could be coming from the magnetosphere of the star, and the second one could be a highly polarized emission, like auroral emission that we see in brown dwarfs, which could be causing the helicity reversal. And there's a possibility that that emission could also be related with a magnetic interaction between the star and the occulting material, which is also responsible for the optical dips. We have new observations coming up, and we can say more about these things. So yeah, that's it.
Thank you.
I'm Mark, and I'm going to be talking about probing gravity with 3 times 2 point analysis. I'll briefly get into what 3 times 2 point is. So this is the combination of 3 cosmological probes with lensing, which measures the shear of galaxies with the gravitational lensing, the correlation in positions of galaxies, galaxy clustering, and galaxy-galaxy lensing, which measures the correlations between positions and lenses of galaxies. And this is a powerful probe for large-scale structure to test cosmological models in large-scale structure. And we apply this method of analysis, this tool, to 2 simulations. One that's like the universe as we think it is, lambda CDM with GR, and another one with modified gravity, in particular FOR gravity, which is a model, an expanded model of gravity where we add a scalar function of the Ricci scalar. And this modified gravity accounts for the accelerated expansion of the universe without dark energy, and with it encodes a sort of a new interaction. And the simulation has a specific instance of this modified gravity model that's compatible with our observations of the local universe of gravity. And what we wanted to test is whether we would get what kind of bias or what would we get if we modeled a universe with modified gravity with GR lambda CDM. And next slide, please. And so we indeed find that there's a bias in the cosmological parameters that we recover. So we get the wrong values for like the components of the universe, the density of the components of the universe, the conditions of the primordial universe. And in particular, we find a very strong bias in this parameter S8, which is interesting because one of the current crises in cosmology is the S8 tension, so-called, which consists in having 2 different and incompatible measurements of this parameter that parameterizes sort of the clustering, how matter clusters in and form structure. And the measurements in the CMB in the primordial universe differ from the measurements in large-scale structure in the modern universe. So this is sort of a tentative result that maybe we should model gravity differently in order to maybe account for this S8 tension in cosmology. And that's it.
So, hi everyone, I am Maide, a second year PhD of the Supernova Group. And I am working on a statistical analysis of the early spectra of type 2 and type 2. So both types are collapsed supernovae, which means that they come from the explosion of massive stars, but the main difference is the amount of hydrogen that the progenitor has before exploding. So type 2 comes from a progenitor with hydrogen rich, while type 2b have lost part of the hydrogen. So because they both have some hydrogen, their early spectra is very similar, dominated by these hydrogen lines, and this could lead to a misclassification if they are not follow enough as to arise more lines. And this is affecting the fraction of the post-collapse supernova. Because of this, what we want is to prove that even if they look similar, they have some spectral feature evolving differently for each type, and that by measuring those, we can properly classify. Next slide. So what we did is to identify those differently evolving lines, helium-1 and H-alpha, and we measure their strength through the pseudo-equivalent width and Coulomb Hammers. Below, you have the results where we see, as expected, that the type 2Bs show stronger lines. And so later, we applied some statistical methods to prove the significance of that separation, as with the density of the two population, where we again saw the same tendency. And we also applied some machine learning techniques to visualize all the data measurements that we have for each spectrum, and to define some classification regions for each of the two types. And the main idea is to use this analysis and these classifications to develop a new classification tool for this early spectra. And indeed, we proved our method with some newly classified supernova that were not included into our main sample, and we managed to present some misclassification or to suggest some reclassification for some of those supernovae. And that's it.
Hi everyone, my name is Kim and I do 1A cosmology in the infrared. So as many of you know, type 1A supernovae are very good at determining distances in the universe, and especially in the near infrared, they are nearly standard candidates, whereas in the optical, you have to standardize them using the shape of the light curve, for instance. Especially in the infrared is great for that. Secondly, there's little dust, so that won't affect our measurements that much. So my work is essentially doing everything from taking an image with a telescope to create a Hubble diagram. So that includes reduce the image, remove the light from the host galaxy, try to measure the brightness of the supernova, and then we go to the next slide. So once you have that, you can construct light curves. So here's just an example of doing that using something called Snoopy. And once you have the light curve and do the fitting, you can then determine the peak brightness, which in turn gives you a distance modulus. So here's an example of some of our supernovae. So here you have distance modulus as function of redshift. At bottom you have the Hubble residuals. This is the first part of the project. So this here is just extend the number of publicly available type 1A supernovae in the near infrared, which isn't that high because it's very difficult to observe these supernovae. And then the second part of the project will be to actually determine the Hubble constant using Cepheids, for instance, as calibrators. Yeah, that's it. Thank you very much.
I'm Julian Unzagan, and I'm here to talk about my thesis, which is about searching for a type of object that has never been found in the Milky Way, intermediate mass black. Next slide, please. So as some of you know, in one side of the spectrum, you have stellar mass black holes that are born from the death of massive stars between roughly 1 and 100 solar masses. And on the opposite side of the spectrum, you have supermassive black holes of several million solar masses, typically found at the center of galaxies. And for a long time, we believed that one comes from the other. But we started seeing more and more evidence of supermassive black holes as high as redshift 11, which means that if you plug the numbers, you realize that those kinds of black holes do not have enough time to grow that massive in such a short period of time. So we needed to invoke a new type of object that was both of intermediate mass range and of high redshift. So we call them primordial black holes. And some of these primordial black holes actually didn't grow into the supermassive black holes that we see at high redshift, but rather remain with a very similar mass and become the leftover intermediate mass black holes that we are able to see at current redshift. Next slide, please. So we utilized semi-analytical models that not only recreate the history of the Milky Way, but also the merger history of these primordial black holes, all the way from high redshift to redshift 0. And we realized that about 10 wandering black holes are expected in a Milky Way-type galaxy, and that 60% of them might actually belong to this primordial black hole population that almost had no mass growth in all the period of time. And that the reason that this type of object has not been found yet could be because they're actually wandering in orbits much farther away than we initially thought, more than 100 kiloparsecs away from us. Even though they are much farther away than initially thought, we are still trying to search for them observationally. And the way we do this is by trying to find clusters of stars that might be surrounding these intermediate mass black holes. These clusters of stars must be very small, must be composed of all stars, and those stars must have a high proper motion. If you combine all these conditions with all the surveys that we've worked with and observations from the Grand Teton telescope, we've arrived to some candidates that we believe might hide an intermediate mass black hole within. And with this information, we might have more data about the early stages of the universe. So thank you.
Thank you.
Hello, everyone. My name is Luis, and I'm going to talk about this work with I did in collaboration with Manuel and Laura Cruz, damping of density of the five species of matter. First, I would like to say what is a neutron star. A simple definition is one of the possible ends of a massive star. And on the right side, you can see a combined image in the X-ray range of a neutron star, and the left side you can see what we used to describe a neutron star from the theoretical point of view. Neutron stars offers the possibility to study string conditions of matter. They can generate the strongest magnetic field in the universe. They are also dense objects, and the density is similar to the one that we can find in heavy nuclei. And also the temperatures can get values up to 10 Kelvin. So one thing that is important about neutron stars is the composition. We know that they could have a dense atmosphere made of hydrogen, helium, carbon. The crust could be composed of ions, electrons, protons, and the most abundant particles are neutrons. That's why they stars. And about the inner core, it is still unknown. There are several candidates. We know that the density in the core is much higher than in the other layers of the star. So quartz could be a possible candidate. This is what we assume. We know that most of the stars could be found in a binary system, like the sun. And after the stars end their life, they can generate neutron stars that could also be found in binary system. We know that they exist because we detected this a collision of two neutron stars in 2017 with LIGO Virgo experiments. And what is important about the coalescence of two neutron stars is that this phenomena could happen in a window of time of milliseconds. So after the merger, the system suffered volume expansions and compressions that could generate these violent density oscillations. And typically, from the theoretical point of view, we use relativistic numerical simulations for this kind of phenomena. We use the ideal case in which we consider ideal fluids, but it would be interesting to include viscous dissipation. We compute one of these viscous dissipation and code it in the so-called bulk viscosity. And we realize that these density oscillations, if we assume the confined quark matter, could be done in this window of time of from 0 to 20 milliseconds. So it is possible that these density oscillations could be done by this one viscosity.
Well, I am Jordi Blanco Pozo, a PhD student under the supervision of Guillem Anglada and Manuel Berger. And well, my thesis consists on stellar activity mitigation and radial velocity data. So with the radial velocity method, we are able to detect exoplanets as we study the Doppler shifts that a planetary companion induces on the spectra of the stellar host. And however, we are also sensitive towards line shape distortions induced by all sources of stellar activity, as we can see in this animation produced by Starship, where we show the effect of a spot crossing event on an average stellar line, as we have a spot that induces a redshift and a blue shift. This induces a noise floor on our observations that makes the detection of exoplanets below 1 meter per second to be very, very few. So we cannot get to the limit of 10 centimeters per second, which would be the precision needed to detect an Earth twin. So in my PhD thesis, we are trying to tackle this problem from two sides. There is one side of the data representation, so try to search for data that is able to disentangle between both effects. And here we show this methodology that we've developed, where for this CTF function, which is a measurement of the average stellar line, we are trying to decompose it into a component that is sensitive only to shift, also to Doppler shifts, this epsilon, and also by this stellar activity that produces a shift on the stellar line, so it mimics this shift. And then another components that try to model the line shape distortions. So we can see here which are the shapes of this basis function and which is the variability that they induce. And what we try to find is a model that relates these activity indicators, which are not affected by planets, and then correct for the activity in our radial velocity measurement. So in the next slide. So in order to correct for this, we try to find a model with neural networks. In this case, I show a scheme of the convolutional attention network that we've developed, where we get as input spectroscopic time series, which are only affected by activity, and then we try to get the radial velocity correction. And this network is trained with Starship data, which is the stellar activity simulator developed in the group. So we are able to get a model on how the star behaves and then apply it to real data. So we have all this input, and then we get a model for the observations, where the observations are in blue, and red our predictions. And we can see in the residuals that we can reduce the RMS of our observations by a factor of 2. Thank you. Okay.
Hey, hi everyone. My name is Cristina Jimenez Palau. I am a third-year PhD student under the supervision of Luis Galván. Go ahead. So today I will present the first main project of my PhD, which is basically to study the correlation between the spectral properties of type 1a supernovae and their host galaxies. So how we should do that? So we have a big sample of IFU data from these 3 different surveys, if you can see them. So from one hand, we have this IFU data, and then we have the measured velocities from the corresponding IFU cubes. So why we do that? Because we know from previous works
that there's a possible correlation between the silicon velocities and the progenitors that this supernovae has. So this is a good thing, because if we try to study this, maybe we can say if these correlations are real or not. So if there's some kind of progenitor that favors one type, like the one that may have high velocity, or the other one may have low velocity. So how we characterize the environment? Okay, so this is the galaxy. Probably one can think, well, if I want to know what's going on in the environment, probably the best way is to do it this way. So you are taking just a small part of the galaxy, so it's more representative of the environment of the supernova itself. But also you can do it globally, taking the whole galaxy as the environment. So in our study, we do both cases. And now, go to the next slide. So how can I apply everything that I explained into practice? So in one part, we measure the velocities from the spectra. Here I show an example of like two silicon velocities of one supernova in different phases. And the way that I do this is using a code that is called SN Cosmo, but the basic idea is just to measure like the peak maximum at the big bang. So here's an example of the fitting. And then this would be like from the velocities part. Then if you move to the host properties, what I do is to use a stellar synthesis population code called Starlight. So I did this, the IFS data with this. And then I also introduce a photometry from a package called Phosphot that must be here introduced. So the idea is to just get the local and global photometry, and then to match like the photometry and the spectra. And then we try to see these correlations. So at the moment, we see that we are not appreciating that much of a correlation in disagreement to previous works, because apparently the sample was more biased to this part of the plot, and now we find all of these low mass targets for the high velocity that were before. So yeah, that's it.
Hello, I'm Christian, and I just submitted my thesis 2 days ago, so hopefully I'll be presenting it later. So hopefully I'll be presenting this in more detail very soon in my defense. So I've been working with modified gravity, especially working on calculating this property parameter known as the EG estimator, which is a test to validate if your data follows a given or agrees with a given model of gravity. And the original definition is given by this expression here, which relates the space distortion field with the velocity field. And this can be translated to observational quantities in Fourier space with the angular power spectrum by relating the galaxy-galaxy lensing with the galaxy clustering in redshift space. And since we're in redshift space, this beta parameter appears, which is the redshift space distortion parameter, which relates the growth rate of structures with the linear galaxy bias. The interest of this estimator is that the theoretical predictions for GR are really straightforward, since it only depends on the cosmological parameters. As you can see here, the theoretical prediction for GR just depends on the matter density parameter today over the growth rate of a structure, which is also related to the matter density parameter at a given redshift. I also have been testing this parameter in another model of gravity, which has already been introduced in a previous presentation, which is the F of R Kurzawicki gravity. It's the only thing you have to know is that this is one of the most promising theories of gravity as an alternative to GR, since it allows to explain the accelerated expansion of the universe without needing the cosmological constant. In this theory, the growth rate is scale dependent, so the EG estimator will also be scale dependent, unlike in GR, which is scale independent, since the growth rate, when you go to smaller scales, contains a boost over GR. Go to the next slide. So in order to calculate the beta parameter, we use the multiples of the correlative function.
And for that, we have we need to separate the scales in order to check for scale dependence. And we run into some issues here because in the smaller scales, which are the ones that you want to estimate more, since are the ones with respect the biggest difference between the models, it has very few data points. Also, the models are not very accurate, and also you have many nonlinear parameters that create many degeneracies. So the final results for these estimators for the small scale are very biased, and the error bars are very big, so it's not good enough in order to differentiate between the models. So we propose a last test using a chi-square between the data vectors of the two catalogs in order to check for significance difference. We find a great value, so we can, in their case, we can separate the two theories, and that's it.
Okay, this is Carlos. He couldn't make it, but he asked me to just give a very quick overview of what he's doing. Got some personal issues. So Carlos is a PhD student with Ignacio Rivas and now also supervised by Manuel Perger. He's working with the exoplanets group, working on stellar activity. Basically, he's been focusing mostly on one star, but essentially the problem that he wants to solve is starting from a list of time series and observables, a bit what Jordi was explaining. He's taking all this information and then doing a full inversion model. For example, you want to know how many spots you have on a star, where are the spots, the latitude of the spots. Some of these observables are very degenerate. For example, the photometry, you can see a spot in the light curve, but you don't know if it's in the north, in the south, whatever, right? But then when you combine it with spectroscopic indexes, things that you can measure, for example, from Carmenes, HARPS, and other instruments, then you can break these degeneracies and figure out where are these spots. In this study in particular, Carlos has been studying that there are several active regions that remain constant over time. I wasn't timing myself. Okay, whatever. And then that they become consistent, and here is combining test space photometry data with HARPS and a number of observations. And here is basically is a forward model thing, and then basically you have models, you compute your reference statistic and try to improve it and see if it works. These models have a lot of parameters, and it is a bit complicated inversion problem. And this is a bit results of what Carlos has been doing. Now he's basically trying to refine and trying to produce better spectroscopic indices. This is a very active star that does very weird things. So the cross correlation function is not a simple thing to model, and not the model itself, but actually to measure and to get some quantitative things that you can compare in the observations and in the theory, and to be able to do this inversion problem. And basically, he's also working on this simulator to include all the features that are needed to be able to do this inversion satisfactorily. And that's it. And let's thank Carlos for all the
Okay, hi, I'm Alejandro Rossi, and I'm doing the PhD here. My supervisor is Mar Mesqua. And so what I've been doing is, well, first thing, one thing that has been widely observed, we could almost say established, is that in the massive galaxy regime, we see that when there are merging galaxies, this is strongly correlated with AGN triggering. So the question is, this has been very observed in the dwarf galaxy regime. So the question is, does this happen in the dwarf galaxy regime? And it is also interesting because it is motivated by the supermassive black hole growth. Because if we know how supermassive black holes or intermediate mass black holes grow, we can sort of start to put constrictions on what was the initial mass in the early universe that gave origin to these supermassive black holes. So what we did is, based on a work by Mesqua and Dominguez from Mesqua and Dominguez Sanchez 2024, where they already classified galaxies as AGN. Well, they have a broad classification for dwarf galaxies, and they use emission line flux diagnostics, such as the BBT diagrams, as you see there. And that's how they did the classification. And in my work, I am using that sample. And what I did is I constructed a merger sequence, sort of following the known merger sequence by Tumre. And
well, I had to visually inspect over 3,000 galaxies and classify them according to the scheme you see here. Next slide, please. And so these are the results I've gotten so far. I'm actually almost done writing the paper that's about this. And we have actually found that there is a very similar behavior in the dwarf galaxy regime. And we have also checked for the environmental factors, and turns out that they also play a role. So we wanted to check both things to disentangle the effect of one and the other thing. And interestingly, although there is an effect on the AGN fraction, like the AGN fraction goes up as the merger progresses, when we flip things around and we see what is the fraction of merging galaxies in an AGN versus a non-AGN sample, well, in any case, mergers or interacting galaxies do not account for roughly 91% of the galaxies that we have. So, in conclusion, dwarf galaxy mergers can trigger AGN merger, but are definitely not the main cause for this. Thank you.
Yeah, and with this, we are done with the bullet seminar. Now, we are almost one. The people, the filming crew, maybe, no, say that everything is okay. So everybody that wanted to be famous, your time is gone now. Thank you very much for coming. I hope you like the format, and hopefully the next one might be the staff one. We will also do one with the staff and postdocs all together, probably before Easter, and then at the end of the year, the junior PhDs. Okay, and if there's a PhD that wants to repeat, because it's useful sometimes to challenge yourself, right? Then you are welcome, PhD students, to reapply and represent your staff at the end of the year. With this, I think we don't have to add anything else. We just go to the last pizza seminar, pizzas of the year, and thanks for coming. See you.